Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and this week I speak with Umbar Shakir. Now, Umbar has worked in consultancies of all sizes, from PwC and PA Consulting to Morehouse and Gate One, to name but a few. She's a huge advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workplace and has delivered keynote speeches and participated in panel discussions exploring the capabilities, the limitations and opportunities of generative AI. We dove deep into that particular topic. It's come up on a few of our episodes to date, but we went a little bit deeper, and it's fair to say Umbar has some quite controversial thoughts, not only on AI, but also the humanisation of technology, and also the attack against the consulting space that seems to permeate, and the reputation that we're looking to escape thanks to the misdemeanors of a relative few. We got into a few things, and again, we went quite deep with it. I think you're going to enjoy this, so let's get started. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge, Umbar Shakir. Hello.
Hello, nice to see you.
Wonderful to have you with us. Of course, I saw you at the Consultancy Growth Network Summit relatively recently,
Yeah.
and I thought you cut a fantastic figure on stage talking about AI as well as many other topics around consultancy. And I do want to get into that, but first off, would you mind just share with us the details, well, not too much detail, of course, but about your impressive career in consulting and digital transformation? What pivotal moments have shaped your approach to leadership and innovation in this space?
Oh, big question to start off with. Thanks for having me, Matt. That was really nice intro. I started my career 24 years ago at PwC, and I have always been in technology of some sort. So my final year dissertation at uni was about how the internet was going to change business. So that's what got me headhunted by PwC. I then went on to work for IBM, PA Consulting, Morehouse, and most recently Gate One, which is a company that's part of Havas, large media network. And I think that the pivotal moments for me in my career have really been, I mean, I'm old enough and ugly enough to have seen the waves of technology hit us in the last sort of few decades. And really looking at how that's affected human connection, human interactions, the importance of experiences, both for customers and for employees, and the effect that technology can have on helping us be human where it matters. And I think those moments of when we're in systems implementation, we're testing things, we're seeing how people react, those human reactions are fundamentally what shaped me and my perspectives on technology, but also then how I've led technology implementations by putting people at the heart of those implementations. So I'm more about humans than I am about the technology. So for me, technology is something that we harness.
I love that, and I know that you've spoken a lot about the humanization of technology, and I saw actually a recent post of yours on LinkedIn where you posited that we need a fresh perspective on how we measure success, especially with the advent of AI and other technologies as well. And I think the example you gave was in the comments was of a call center where all the metrics seem to be aligned with call handler performance rather than on the customer. Can you expand on your thinking on that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I can get quite philosophical about some of this stuff. I think we're still working to very Victorian work ethics. The production line, after our industrialization, era, those factory mentalities are still how we run offices today. So throughput, output, production, productivity is a measure that we hear a lot about. It's also what's touted as a massive benefit of AI. But actually, productivity and throughput and output. The call center example was I had a bit of an argument with a call center manager once where he was talking about his dashboard, and I was saying, "Are you measuring the right things?" And he was like, "Of course I am." And it was call volume, call answering time, call handling time. And I said, "What what what does that tell me to fix if the number is slightly up or down? What's the problem? It doesn't tell me anything about a root cause or a root problem that would affect my customer's experience, or my employee's experience, because employee experience matters when it comes to their motivation and the quality of the interaction that they're having with your customers. And we do tend to, hire very friendly, very chatty, very kind people in service frontline posts, but then we put these metrics around them that fundamentally take away their humanity. There was one particular person that their call handling times were very long, and what it turned out to be was that this was a housing context, and there was a particular person in that call center who elderly people were phoning up because they felt isolated and alone and lonely. They would call up to talk to this particular person. The contact center manager was like, "Well, we need to stop some of that." And it was like, "No, that's lovely. Like, why would you stop that? That's a lovely interaction. That's human interactions." And, it's probably meaning that those elderly people are pressing their red button for emergency calls less frequently. So we actually changed the metrics and changed the mindset about why are we even at work? What's the value that we're trying to deliver here? And so if it is human connection and interaction and solving problems, then shouldn't the metrics be around the quality of those solutions, and how quickly you solved a problem, rather than how long you were on that telephone call for?
Yeah, I love that train of thought. And I wonder because, of course, the context in which we're talking there is in a specific situation. I want to bring you back to consultancy as well. You talked in that same post about how we should be perhaps looking around metrics. I remember this vividly around kindness and humanity.
Yeah.
And I'm keen to know more about how you would go about measuring that, but also in the context of consultancy, how has that influenced your work at the likes of Gate One and Morehouse, PwC, and where you've been?
Yeah, so I think consultants get a bit of a bad rap, really. Um, I I know that we probably come just below sort of, estate agents and lawyers and bankers. And, I saw even on Lemony Snicket, which is a series that my daughter used to watch. There was a joke in there about consultants. The consultants are in. Oh no, not the consultants! And I was just like, oh come on, like give us a break, And a lot of my internal purpose as a consultant has been around wanting to solve problems and wanting to add value and make a difference. And I think most recently at Gate One, when we set up the firm, we actually wanted to set up a company for consultancy as it should be. And that meant some of stripping away of some of the poor behaviors that we do see in some of the bigger firms out there: land and expand, outstaying your welcome, becoming too much of a crutch rather than an enabler. And so, I think bringing it back to metrics, what are the important things to measure as a business then to bring out the right behaviors in your people? And I think that, when we have sales targets and utilization targets and revenue targets, they drive certain behaviors. But what if we had more metrics around the quality of your solution for the client, how you made the client feel? So your net easy to do business scores, your friendliness scores, some of those things fundamentally matter as much as the results that you achieve. And that's, I think there's a blend. I don't want to get rid of, like, you have to have monetary metrics. We are commercial entities. Absolutely. But what are the other scores that round you out a bit more than just pure commerciality? And I think that's what I try to talk to both consultants and my clients about. What are those metrics that you want to measure that drive the right behaviors? Because fundamentally, metrics aren't just about saying, did we hit a result? There's a how did we get to that result and how did we hit that metric? That matters as much to me as the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that when we reflect on companies that do demonstrate those traits of friendliness and that human kind of aspect and connection, I think most would attribute at least that there's a correlation between those features in a business and the more commercially led stuff. I didn't know, and again, excuse my French, but I didn't know a consultancy full of assholes that were actually, excelling on the when it
Yeah,
comes to the dashboard and the metrics and the finances.
yeah.
So I think that's important to say. I'm with you, Amber, that I think the consultancy sector has been under attack. I mean, we've seen it with the likes of the big con last year, and we've seen, the whistleblowers in certain sections, telling the stories internally. I wonder that the culture has how much does culture really play to those expectations and perhaps those behaviors that we've just been talking about, where it doesn't come naturally to be friendly, to have that human first approach.
In terms of sort of humanizing consultancy, fundamentally, all humans, whatever industry you're in, we want to make a difference. We want to matter. And we want to matter to each other. I don't want to sound too noble about some of this stuff, but I do come from a family where my one of my grandfathers was a cleric, and so being in service of humanity really was a big tenet in my family, and and to our culture. And I think I think culture gets talked about a lot, but it's not something that you can influence, but you can't fully design. So you have to, it's a collective expression of the humans that you have in your tribe. And so who you hire, and oh, there goes the doorbell. Do you mind if
No,
I
not at all.
go
Go and
again?
deal with
I'll
that.
start that answer to that question again,
Perfect. Thank
but
you.
just 1 second. Sorry, I still have the Black Friday stuff coming through.
That's okay. You've got to make the most of that.
I was like, sorry.
So it's
You
going
want to
brilliantly, by the
repeat
way.
the
This
question?
Yes.
Sorry.
So to reframe it slightly, it was around how does culture within consultancy, generally speaking, does that allow for the friendliness, the humanity to be sort of present?
Without trying to get too noble about philosophy or theology, one of my grandparents was a cleric. So humanity and being in service of other humans was a big part of my personal family culture. I think when it comes to culture in consulting, culture kind of starts with all of us in the room, really. Like, and I say that about ethics as well. Ethics starts with us in the room. And culture, while you can influence it as leaders in a consulting firm, you can't fully design it. It's a collective expression of the people that you surround yourself with. And so it's interesting. Recently, I've been talking about culture to my friends. I'm also looking for my next adventure in consulting, and culture comes up. And people talk about big firms like it's one homogenous thing, but the subcultures that you get in a firm, even in big firms, small firms, whatever that might be, kind of starts with your leadership team at the top. Whoever's leading a particular practice within a big firm has a particular culture. but the culture in one practice might be different to the culture in another practice. And it's really that collective of who you've hired, how you value that tribe that you sort of, bring together, that then becomes that collective expression of culture. Now, metrics and measures can affect culture because it affects behaviors. And as humans, going back to a little bit of philosophy, we want to matter. We want to make a difference. We want to be in service of each other, whether we consciously or subconsciously have that. We want to connect to human beings. And so creating a culture, I don't know that you can fully create a culture, but you can put conditions that enable certain behaviors, values alignment, purpose alignment to happen in the humans that you have collectively together. And then that expresses a culture. Now, some people in certain firms are helping to enable certain behaviors that express cultures of a little bit more dog eat dog kind of mentality. Some consulting leaders, and I've had some of them myself, nurture a real commitment to each other's success. And I find that those cultures are the ones that tend to overall achieve more. And I've worked in different companies. I'm not going to name and shame. But you take, for a positive example, you take Virgin as a company, and Richard Branson has always said, take care of your people will then take care of your customers. I think that really, really rings true for me in the 25 years of consulting experience and so many different industries and clients that I've had, where you value people perform better. And so I think when anybody is talking or thinking about their culture, I think you have to, all you can be is an influencer or an enabler in that. And so thinking about those metrics, or thinking about your language and how you come across, and what are you rewarding day to day? What do you recognize and reward day to day? Those things matter in helping to cultivate or enable a culture to fully express. But also, how do we evolve culture? Because culture isn't a static thing. I think people who say we need to preserve our culture, I find that hurts my stomach. I think culture should evolve. Humans should evolve. Same way that we can, innovate. If we don't change our cultures, we can't adopt those innovations. So I think evolution of culture is important to talk about as well.
Yeah, and that leads me nicely on. I mean, first off, it's great to hear that humans are so intrinsic to the consultancy space, consultancy need. We've spoken about AI pretty much on every episode of the Consultancy Edge so far, but we've scratched the surface, I feel, compared to, I think, what you can provide, Amber, in terms of your viewpoint. And you've talked about starting with outcomes when it comes to adopting AI. Can you share some more on that? Perhaps some real world examples where you've seen that approach that's already perhaps delivering tangible results in the consultancy space?
Yeah, before I dive into some of those examples, it's worth just taking a step back and acknowledging how much frenzy and hype there's been around AI in the media since ChatGPT landed 2 years ago, almost to the day, and that hype, that sense of FOMO, or fear of missing out, that I initially in the sort of last year, the conversations around what are we going to do? We have to get AI in, we have to do something. And I kind of kept stepping back, again, old enough, ugly enough to have seen all the waves of technology before. And, the promises that technology make don't always deliver. And so I'm I'm not a doomsdayer about AI, but I'm not an evangelist either. I've got nothing to peddle here, really. As consultants, we are our experience, our insights, our solutions are what we are selling. So I've got no axe to grind when it comes to AI. I do think it's an amazing technology and it's got some great power. But I kept going back to basics in that first year with my clients to say, to what end are you trying to implement this stuff? What problem do you have that you're trying to solve? Rather than going, wow, I want this shiny thing, let me shoehorn this to solve some sort of problem. I don't think that that approach to technology has ever paid off for anyone. And so come back to basics around your tech strategy and your strategy in general, corporate strategy. What are the problems? What are the challenges you're trying to solve for? And then you start to build from there. And therefore, what are the ingredients and the menu of policies, processes, solutions, technologies that I need to deliver on my strategy? And so, starting from that premise, I did a started to do an AI strategy for a local authority earlier this year, and they had some use case. They'd done some use case exploration. There was a use case explosion last year of all the things that you could use AI for. And one of the ideas, and I'm sorry, I know that the team at the local authority will know what I'm talking about, and I say this with love, but they came up with an idea around elections. We could have an election assistant. Well, how often do elections come about? And if I was to look under the bonnet at the complaints data for that local authority, how high do election complaints feature in that? And I kind of, just went, are elections a problem for you that you really need AI to solve for this? And so it was an interesting exercise to just even do a dose of reality check to go, guys, is that a big problem? And they're like, yeah, maybe not. But it sounded like a good idea. Logically, it sounded like a good idea, sure. But actually, I kind of, in insight driven organizations, and a lot of my clients over the last few years who had digitized already, were then on the next phase of big data. How do I drive better insights, predictive analytics, all of that sort of stuff? It was like, again, to what end? But what that data driven sort of organization, at least you've got the data. Let's follow the data. What's the data telling us are the big problems that our customers are having, or what are the sticky points in processes, or where do our employees drop off the technology and do a manual workaround? So where are the problems in your business? And I think it's really important to be able to know who you are. And it's a little bit like psychology. Like if you don't know thyself, you can't assert your boundaries well, and you can't then sort of interact well with other human beings. It's like that for companies and organizations. And whether you're a large airline or whether you're a local authority in the south of England, really you should know what your problems are in your business before you jump into AI solutions. And I know that sounds almost like, oh, but you're a technologist, Amber. Why are you telling people to not adopt the technology? Because I don't think every problem out there has an AI shaped answer. And I read earlier this week, there is a journalist at the Washington Post, and she hosted a panel that I was on earlier in the year. And she's beautifully talked about AI being salt. You've got to think about AI like it's salt. It's an integral part of the ingredient of the meal that you're trying to make, but it's not the meal itself. So how do we start to look at technology as an ingredient and an enabler of fundamentally why we're at work, which is to solve problems, is to deliver value to customers, or to citizens. And, let's get back to why, existentially, why are we in existence? So what's your mission? What's your purpose? And I think that will help guide then your technology strategy and your AI strategy. And actually, what we found out with that local authority was they were trying to run before they could walk. They didn't actually have their data in any state that you could build AI on top of it. So we actually went back to basics on actually you need to fundamentally make some decisions about how you're running your technology and your data before you even overlay AI onto it. So I guess if I'm not a doomsayer and I'm not an evangelist, I guess I'm a pragmatist when it comes to technology. So yeah, just be really clear on what problems you're trying to solve.
Well, I think that's a really clear and concise approach. I think far too many people haven't asked that fundamental question of to what end. I think that's a really useful takeaway from that conversation. And I love the salt analogy as well. It seems strange to think that AI could become shelfware already if we don't ask those fundamental questions and don't find the reason first. What is it, as you say, that we're trying to solve? The other aspect of AI I wanted to touch on, Amber, with you is we've talked about consultancy being under attack. I feel that that's being extended into AI a little bit, that it's being sort of positioned as not so much a cheat code as just fundamentally cheating. That, there are a lot of memes doing the rounds and stories of people sitting next to consultants on the plane, and they're working away. They've got ChatGPT on one window, feeding the presentation to the client that they're charging hundreds of thousands, if not millions for. Yeah. What are your viewpoints? Is this a mindset shift that's needed around AI when it comes to the perceptions that we're creating? How damaging is it to think that this is cheating?
So I think ethical use of AI is what's important here, not whether you do or whether you don't. It's how you're using it that really matters. And I remember when I was at uni in the late 90s, and the internet came about and we got email addresses and we could go on something called a search engine, and my lecturers banned Alta Vista. Like, we were not allowed. At one point, my lecturers had us writing things by hand to prove that we had done some of the work, which actually writing something by hand doesn't prove that you actually did the work. So it's a fear. It's operating from a base of fear, right? So, now it's totally acceptable for students to be on their laptops, to look things up on BBC Bitesize or, Adexcel's website. Exam boards have all of their textbooks online, etc. And so I think there's something about what fundamentally in that process of doing our work, and I liken it to craft and graft. So in order to get something done, I have to do some grafting. So whether that's data collection, analytics, curation, summarization, etc., interviewing humans, that will still go on. I'm going to want to talk to my clients when I'm on their sites and in their offices. And I think then once you've done some craft, you then start to craft a solution. And fundamentally, I actually do think a lot of our clients either have a problem with capability in their organization to do that crafting of a solution, or capacity, because there are very, very astute people who aren't management consultants. And I think some of the arrogance in consultancy comes around because we're coming in and solving your problems for you, that there's an arrogance that we know more than our clients. And I just don't subscribe to that at all. So, lots of very bright non-consultants people out there. I don't want this to sound patronizing, it might be, but I what I'm poking at is actually the arrogance of consultants. So but I think what we forget is, why are we there? Are we there because there's a capability gap that we're helping to fill? Or are we there because there's a capacity issue, because every bright person is really, really quite occupied and busy with the business as usual, therefore we are coming in to augment that team? And if we think of ourselves as capacity and capability gap fillers, I think some of that ego comes out of the value of what we're actually doing, right? So it is still valuable, and it does have a monetary, figure to it. And I think the ethics then come into, if I'm going to then use tools, and consultants have been using pre-made templates, but we don't see that as cheating. Reusing frameworks, why don't we see that as cheating? Leaning into academia and taking a lot of research that comes out of, your Ivy Leagues and your Oxbridge and Imperials. We adopt those things into our methodologies. So if we rinse and repeat something, that's not seen as cheating. But fundamentally, that's all AI is really doing. It's crowdsourcing data sets and generating and synthesizing new data based on that crowdsourced sources of knowledge. So your large language models with trillions of bits of data in them. All it's doing is it's instantaneously giving you the crowdsourced answer. Now, I have some feelings about the answer that you get, because some of those aren't the highest quality. So it's only as good as the data that it's been trained on. I know that McKinsey have their own, they trained it on their own data set. So there's a little bit more confidence that, it's going to give you clever ideas and good results. But there's a lot, it's still a black box, large language models. I don't know what data sets are in them. Gemini and Copilot and OpenAI, they don't disclose their data sources. So I think rather than it be a lowest common denominator, I kind of think of it as a human superpower stack. If I've got ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever tool of choice that you're using, that gives me, maybe it'll shortcut getting me a template or a 5-step guide to something, that I'm trying to deliver, or it gives me the bare bones of a risk register for a particular industry. Sure, that saves me time. The ethics then come in, and do I give that time saving from a cost perspective back to my client, or am I charging them for the value of the outcome of the solution that I craft for them? So I think it comes back to, how are you pricing some of your consulting delivery? Are you just time and materials? If you're charging on a time and materials basis, I think it's only fair that if you save time, you save your client money. If I'm pricing it on outcome, then I'm sorry, I'm going to take that as margin. Yeah. I'm going to take the productivity gain that I've gotten as margin, because the thing that my client has valued and how I've priced it is the solution that I've crafted for them. Now, that superpower stack, if I've got ChatGPT, I have to then overlay my human brain onto that to discern the quality of that output. So I'm not going to just take something from an AI model and cut and paste it in. That to me is really lowest. It's the race to the bottom if that's how you're using AI as a consultant. That's where, if that's what you're doing as a firm, you are going to create a race to the bottom, and your clients will come back to you and say, well, I can do that. And therefore you do yourself out of a job, but also you're eroding your value proposition and your price point. So the price erosion, and we've seen that, I was as well as a partner at Gate One, I was the Chief AI Strategy Officer at Havas, which was our parent company. So the Havas AI unit was really looking at, really early on, how some of these tools were going to change marketing, comms, media, production. And it impacts that so much more than even consulting, because parts of that production cycle of creating content could be quite commoditized. So, freelance copywriters, freelance graphic designers, those were the things that could be the efficiency gains. But actually, what does that then do to your talent of the future? So, and consultants came to me as well and said, "Oh, we won't need analysts anymore." Well, how did you become a senior consultant or an exec if you hadn't cut your teeth as an analyst on doing some of the graft kind of work? So, what does the graft actually teach us or train us in? Managing a risk register is not just about the technicality of updating fields in a spreadsheet. The content, over and over again, over the years, you start to discern and get experience in. I can look at somebody's risk register and go, I know what your top 3 problems are now, without having to do lots of analytics. Now, that experience comes over time, and what we develop as skills and capabilities as consultants are critical thinking, the ability to discern what the problem and the exam question really is here, the ability to see patterns and to understand the interventions that will influence a pattern to a better result. Those are the real value add of a consultant. That's why you hire somebody as a consultant to come in to help you solve your problems, because they can get to the nub of it quicker. They've had the experience of how to solve things, and there's a reassurance that somebody's experience and expertise is going to get us to a better outcome than we could just do ourselves. So if that's the value of what we do as consultants, then how much of that do we give to the AI, and how much of it do we retain? So I've done the first 2 layers of the 3-layer human technology superpower stack, because I think if you take that output from an AI tool, you overlay your human brain, so all of my experience and my judgment to discern what the solution is. I then bring my human heart into this, and this is where we bring that emotional connection to humans. And I think the best consultants out there are the ones that aren't just technical and aren't robotic. And I have heard that about consultants before. You're just sort of, robotrons, and you cookie cutter, rinse and repeat sort of solutions. I think the ones that tailor things, that really look at their audience and are able to tell a good story and to create the strategic narrative around the crafted solution, those solutions are the sticky ones. Those are the people who can actually make the change management happen. And I know we talk about sort of, EQ and, I talk about kindness and friendliness, because really fundamentally, what is EQ? How do you measure EQ? Well, I can measure someone's experience, because I can ask them what they thought, what they felt, and what they did. And we can measure those things. And I think that thinking and feeling part of it are the metrics around kindness for me. So it's important to ask our clients as consultants, when we were delivering with you, what did you think, feel, and do through that journey?
I think that's the beginning of a great conversation to be had, Amber. And on my reflection on that is, the consultancies that we speak to, especially the boutiques, they do tend to, and they'll admit this freely, that they aren't the best at going back, gathering feedback as well on the impact that they've created for that client as well, which again speaks to the experience, their interpretation of the data, and anything that AI might be creating for them. So creating those conversations is going to be fundamental. I want to pick up on something else you brought there, and by the way, I'm getting the sense in a really, really big way, and I hope that our listeners are too, that we aren't being made redundant as consultants, that human aspect is still fundamental to the success of what we provide, and it is the basis of the value that we bring as well, and impacts on pricing, as you said. So I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on. We've been told, of course, that the pyramid structure of consultancy is under threat because, as you say, those analysts are going to be squeezed at the bottom. Perhaps people are seeing AI as being a replacement for that need. But to your point about that experience that's required, how in danger do you think that shape of pyramid is? Is it becoming narrower? Is it becoming that diamond formation? What are your views on that?
I think it comes back to a little bit of the answer I gave to you about culture.
Mm.
And, your leadership teams set the tone around some of that, shape. And I think we have to ask ourselves some really, like, fundamental questions about, are we playing a short-term game around numbers, commerciality, and revenue? And are you trying to maximize next year's results? Or are you building a firm that plays more of an infinite game, as Simon Sinek talks about, which is building something that has legs beyond your tenure there? Yeah. So are you building legacy for your business? And I don't know many businesses now. There might be some very cutthroat sort of, boutiques out there that go, yeah, we just want to grow it to a point where somebody puts cash on the table, buys us, and I'm out. Yeah. Sure. There are some people whose goal is to play golf, retire and play golf. Most of us, and it isn't just about consulting, but most of us want to do work that has meaning or has purpose in the world. And so tapping back into, why did you become a consultant in the first place for leaders is really important. And so the nurturing the talent of the future is also really key to me. So I read recently, there's a regional news team and they all got made redundant because AI can do what they do. And they've got one of the senior people is babysitting the system. I'm like, okay, well, when that senior person's gone and you've now done away with all your journalism and how you then became the senior person, who's going to babysit it in the future? And so the interplay between human and technology needs to be there to get the best out of both. And I think I've said already, ethics start with us in the room. When my clients come to me and say, right, tell me how I can use AI to get rid of 200 heads in our this function, I go, wrong exam question. Right? There are so many problems that you can't even solve because you're at capacity. So how do we free up capacity to solve bigger and better problems like sustainability, like, over consumerism, like mental health in our workplaces, like, those sorts of things that people go, oh, well, we can't afford to do that. We're firefighting on all these different fronts. Well, okay, that's how AI is going to hack you being able to solve better problems. It's so short-sighted to take heads out. And sure, there are probably some organizations where we normalized tedium and we normalized sort of, body shopping. And maybe we could do without some of that. So get rid of those heads. But I would be retraining people into then the capabilities that I want for the future, rather than just changing the shape of the pyramid. I think it's, what are we doing at each level of the pyramid that then starts to really count for me? Yeah. How do I redirect my juniors, or how do I accelerate people between the layers? How do I use AI to train somebody faster than the number of risk registers we had to all manage at the beginning of our careers, right? So that grafting, how do we accelerate our junior people to craft faster
Yeah,
by
lovely.
using AI? So I think it's changing your mindset about how to use the technology and how to use your people and the interplay between them that matters to me.
Yeah, I love that. And Amber, I'd already feel like we've been really discussing the future of consultancy in amongst all of this, but I wonder what are some of the things that you see coming into play in the coming years? I know that you don't label yourself as a futurist necessarily, but you certainly have your finger on this pulse. What do you think that our consultancy listeners, the leaders out there, need to be aware of, do you think?
I think I think I'd really be encouraging consultancy leaders to come out of our post 1970s mindset. Now, I talked about Victorian work ethics and I stand by that. But actually, in consulting, I think a lot of our culture metrics, behaviors are driven by this post 1970s sort of, banking, investment, Jack Welch sort of, view of capitalism where and we've seen it this year. There's a couple of big firms announced mass redundancies, and they will hire again. And this hiring firing cycle is just so dehumanizing. And I go, what could be an alternative way of how we run commercial entities that played a longer, more infinite game, that meant that we didn't have to. What if Deloitte had held their nerve a bit on poor numbers for a couple of years, but maybe overall they would have, maybe in 5 years' time, have a more capable workforce that would be making them more money than they will by having sacked 1,000 people this year. Like I don't have all the answers, but I kind of go, this technology has the potential to change industries, change how we train people, change how we develop products, and change how we deliver our services. And so, as consulting leaders, we should be thinking about how do we nurture the consultants of the future? What kinds of capabilities are they going to need to have? And I think, and this isn't just for consultancies, I think this goes for every industry. We need to have more enterprise agility. So I kind of go, a lot of our governance has come about, rules, regulations, policies, processes. They've come about because as humans, we don't like uncertainty. So we want to reduce risk, we want to manage uncertainty, and so we put all these rules in place. But actually, those rules hinder us from adapting. And the rate of innovation of technology out there in the last few years has picked up. And so, while we had cycles of, retraining, I think Amazon put out a stat that 60% of the jobs that we do today didn't exist over 40 years ago. So we already adapt as humans. We do different jobs, we do different roles, and that's okay. That's why culture needs to adapt. That's why skills need to adapt. But I think that cycle, those paradigm shifts are going to get shorter and shorter in timescale, which means that we don't now have the luxury of having 5-10 year strategies. We have 2 year strategies, and we have to be adaptable within those 2 to 3 year life cycles of strategy refreshes. And so adaptability is really key, but that's only going to happen if you start to get rid of some of your rules and regulations. And that feels scary. That feels scary to people. But actually, I was talking to an ex-partner of mine from PA consulting days, and he's doing a bit of an analysis His name's Conrad Thompson. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him, but he's doing analysis on government innovation centres. And he was saying, I don't think one has paid off in terms of return on investment. Like the government pumped in millions of pounds into innovation centres. And actually I started to think about it. I was intellectually riffing with him. And I was kind of going, yeah, because what we do is we give people the freedom to ideate, but then we stifle the implementation, right? So business cases, ROI, analyses, like, and we paralyze people with analysis and 12-week business cases. And I worked at a very progressive housing association a few years ago where we did away with business cases. We just went, you know what? They don't de-risk delivery. So 12 weeks up front is just not de-risking any of our deliveries. And we've probably now, as businesses, got about 30 years of digital data on everything we've done, right? That we could analyze. Are we any smarter or de-risked or better at implementing? I mean, I still hear about millions of pounds of overspend. You still get companies having huge outages and data breaches. Like I don't know that all of these rules that are inhibiting enterprise agility, and I'm not talking about Scrum and sprints here. I'm talking about agility to pivot your strategy, to make decisions quickly, to cull something that isn't delivering, to, right? We're so bad at sunsetting anything. Like if we look at product, the move from project to product, like even when you get into product world, that is not the panacea. I think, whether you're waterfall or agile, it doesn't matter. The excellent delivery is the thing that should be the thing of value, right? So agile isn't better than waterfall and vice versa. Like they're just a method of getting stuff done. And what I advocate for is a bit more freedom in a framework on the implementation side, not just the ideation side. And that's why I kind of go, again, when it comes to implementation, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Because then you'll be able to harness all these ideas and all this rate of innovation that's happening on the technology side better if you have that enterprise agility. And the other thing that I think we haven't invested enough in consulting for our people, or what we do is service innovation and digital dexterity. So really using tools. I mean, I'm still using Excel and PowerPoints, and so are many of my consulting colleagues, all across the board, whether you're big firm, small firm. And I'm kind of going, oh, we can do better than that. Like we can do better than that. But we also are change resistant,
Yeah.
and we don't adopt things quickly, or we poo-poo it and say it's cheating.
Yeah.
And have the moral superiority to go, I use my brain. Well, all right. But you also use a number of templates and methodologies that have been tried and tested. And where's the method innovation that's happening in our industry that needs to then keep up with the rate of change of innovation from the technology side. And I've tried to do some of that at Gate One. I went to our people and change team and said, guys, change management needs to change. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I'm doing agile and I get the technology teams to spit stuff out in an agile way. No one can consume it in an agile way. So that led to a new method about minimum viable change. And actually what we found was the artifacts of needs analysis and training needs and culture and strategic narratives and leadership development. Those things still stay the same. We actually still need those anchors, but how we package that, how the sequencing of how we deliver those consulting interventions changes. And I think that's really important to stay ahead of, because if you do still want to be the human brain and human heart that people bring in to their organizations to help them with their capacity and capability gaps, we're going to need to be ahead of our clients' maturity in harnessing those technologies. So I think if you really want to, you know, particularly as a boutique, you can't lean on big firm branding, marketing, methods and solutions. You're going to need to bring something else to the party. And I think playing more of that long-term infinite game is key for consulting leaders, but also building your consultant of the future is
Yeah.
key too.
That innovation and agility, especially for boutiques, is one of those superpowers, I guess. That's imperative to be on
Yeah.
top of.
Yeah.
Amber, we're just about out of time. I could talk for days with you.
I know.
I wanted. We always finish off with this one quick feature, which is snog, marry, avoid.
Oh gosh.
It's all very professional, I have to say. So the snog in this context is: what is a quick win that you would advocate for any boutique consulting leader out there to implement in their business to get the greatest impact?
Are you talking in an AI context, or are you talking
It can be, if that's your bag. It can be absolutely anything. Anything that's going to give any consulting leader the edge, you feel.
So I think it would be two things. Am I allowed two
Yeah,
songs?
go on, man.
Go
As
on.
it's you.
The first one is around capability. You need to SWOT up. You need to be looking at trends, looking at market intelligence, organizations like Gartner, Forrester, Statista, they've got intel and insights that can help you shape some of your thinking and help you build some of that service innovation out. So I think it's worth investing in some of those analyses and research and really swatting up on some of this stuff. The second part of it is a little bit more practical and pragmatic. And I would be, as a consulting leader, be investing in either Copilot licenses or ChatGPT Enterprise or Google Stack, whichever your stack of preference is. I would be looking at harnessing AI for everyday work that my team are doing. So if you're not immersed in it and you haven't got your hands on it, you can't advise on some of this stuff. It's really hard to be an advisor if you're not utilizing the tools themselves. So
Great.
I think it's practicing what you preach as well when it comes to technology. But again, I would kind of be going to what end, because these licenses aren't cheap as well, and can get quite hefty if you've got 300 people in your firm. If you're less than 50, absolutely go for it. I think it pays off a lot. The ROI will be there for you in margins. Oh no, I could keep talking. I'm just like,
Yeah, I'm going to
you
cut
need
you
to
off
think
there.
about your pricing models, and you need to think about.
I would argue you're actually talking about some of the marry stuff as well. So the marry is some of that longer term. What would you embed for the long term in your consultancy if you were starting again today to ensure your success?
I would be really embedding some of that sort of innovative culture, innovation culture. So creativity, really setting time aside as a team and space to do some of that critical thinking, creative thinking, systems and methodology innovation. Like, what are the things that give you that competitive edge in the longer term that differentiates you in the market? I think that's really critical for smaller and boutique firms, and also creative pricing models. I think, how can we start to, whether it's risk and reward that you go into with your client, whether it's pricing on outcomes, rather than T&M, time and materials. So I think that creativity, retainer models are very important. So that comes back to the not outstaying your welcome if you don't have scale and you're not going to land and expand. Sure, that's a USP, but then how do you maximize that with clients by maybe staying on as a critical friend, on a retainer model that means that you've kept relationships going, you have a bit of longevity without being a crutch.
Yeah,
You're
providing
more of
value.
that enabler. Yeah, like really, really um ruthlessly focus on your value add in the market.
Wonderful. And lastly, the avoid. What would you ditch from the world of consultancy, just like that, to make a positive difference?
Um, some of the behaviors, I think, the arrogance, the behaviors around, I've got all the answers. We don't have all the answers. Or that, uh, just that mindset of cheating. I think there's if we think about craft and graft and just keep going back to that concept of where's the value in what you do, then have some humility about that as well. And if you really are about adding value, then let's shed some of that arrogance that comes with consulting. I'd love us to maybe come down the arsehole ranking, like the arsehole indices. Let's bring consulting down into the 20s and 30s on that list, rather than be in the top five.
I love how we started with one AI, artificial intelligence, and ended with asshole indices. I
Yeah,
love that
also
as a
indices, yeah,
measure.
the other
Numerics,
AI.
that's what we've learned about today from you, Amber. Thank you.
Yeah.
Listen, where can people find you, connect with you? What's the best thing to do?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name. There's not many people who are called Umbar Shakir out there. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I do sort of little talking head videos and tidbits and yeah, and anyone who wants to talk, I could talk for England. Like, yeah, we could keep going, Matt. Like, I've really enjoyed talking to you
I
today.
think I already know right now this is going to be our longest episode ever, but
Oh no,
fingers
sorry.
crossed. It's absolutely, it's all killer, no filler. Amber, thank you so much for joining us on the Consultancy Edge today.
Thank you, Matt.